12-year-old Chuka lived with his mother Ada in a tiny one-room apartment in Ajagunle, where the walls seemed to close in a little more every day. The cracked ceiling leaked when it rained, and the fan over their heads worked only when there was power, which wasn't often. Ada, widowed for 5 years, had tried everything to keep them afloat, cleaning offices, selling akara by the roadside, even washing clothes for people in the neighborhood. But no matter how hard she worked, it never seemed enough. Her true passion, painting, always took a back seat to survival. Still, at night, when Chuka had gone to sleep and the world was quiet, Ada would bring out her worn-out brushes and cheap watercolors, pouring her soul onto scraps of canvas and old cardboard. That Friday night was different. Ada had just returned from work, her body aching, her spirit broken. She had been laid off from her cleaning job. No explanation, no severance, nothing. She sat on the edge of the rickety bed, staring at the tiny stove in the corner. The pot was empty, there was no food, and no money to buy any. Chuka lay curled up, fast asleep, his small body rising and falling with each breath. Her heart ached just looking at him. Out of frustration and a deep, gnawing hunger, Ada dragged out her canvas. She dipped her brush into the last bit of paint she had and began to work, tears blurring her vision. She painted herself, sitting in front of a table, holding a steaming plate of jollof rice and chicken, the kind of meal she hadn't seen in months. The strokes were fierce, almost desperate, as if her very survival depended on it. By the time she was done, it was almost 3 a.m. She stared at the painting, feeling empty inside, and left it propped against the wall before collapsing into bed. The next morning, Chuka's voice woke her up. "Mummy, Mummy, come and see!" He was shouting, tugging at her arm. Ada, groggy and disoriented, sat up slowly. "What is it, Chuka?" she asked, rubbing her eyes. "The food! Look at the table!" he cried. Ada's eyes darted to the old plastic table in the corner of the room, and her breath caught in her throat. There, sitting as if it had always been there, was a plate of hot, steaming jollof rice with 2 fat pieces of chicken, exactly like the one she had painted. Ada froze, her heart racing. She stood up slowly, approaching the table like she was in a trance. She reached out, half expecting her hand to pass through it, but no, it was real. The aroma hit her nostrils, rich and spicy. Chuka was already digging in, his face lit with pure joy. "It's real, Mummy. It tastes so good." Ada sat down heavily, staring at the plate, her mind spinning. Had she bought it and forgotten? Was someone playing a prank? No, it was impossible. She couldn't explain it, but somehow her painting had turned into real food. That night, after Chuka had gone to sleep, Ada sat staring at the now empty canvas. The hunger pangs were still there, the fear still raw, but now there was something else, a dangerous curiosity. She decided to try again. She picked up her brush and painted a loaf of bread with butter and hot tea. When she finished, she stared at it for a long moment, waiting. Nothing happened. Feeling foolish, she went to bed. The next morning, just as the sunlight began to seep through their thin curtains, Ada woke up to the unmistakable smell of freshly brewed tea. She sat up with a jolt. There, on the same table, was the exact breakfast she had painted. Loaf, butter, and tea, just as she'd imagined it. Ada's hands trembled as she reached out, her fingers brushing the warm mug. It was real. It was all real. Over the next few days, Ada tested it again and again. Egusi soup, yam porridge, even fried plantain, and every time, the food would appear like magic the next morning. Relief flooded her heart, but beneath it was a creeping unease. This wasn't normal. It couldn't be. But with Chuka's eyes shining bright and his belly finally full, Ada told herself it was a blessing. After all, in a world that had offered her nothing but hardship, maybe, just maybe, her art was finally giving something back. Ada's kitchen, once bare and echoing with emptiness, was now a place of quiet miracles. Bowls of steaming soups, plates of fried rice, akara, beans, and even chilled drinks appeared day after day, conjured from her weary hands and battered paintbrushes. Each morning, without fail, whatever Ada painted the night before materialized on their plastic table. real and ready to eat. She and Chuka, once too familiar with hunger, now ate their fill. For a while, it felt like they were living in a dream. But dreams in Lagos don't stay private for long. It began innocently enough. Mrs. Onomi from next door noticed that Ada no longer came to the communal tap to fetch water with the same worn-out face. Then there was the security guard, Baba Sul, who remarked that Ada's son looked healthier, no longer the skinny, withdrawn boy who used to beg for scraps. Whispers started. How could Ada, who was always broke and struggling, suddenly afford food every day? Some said she had a secret benefactor. Others hinted darkly at juju or money rituals. The gossip reached a fever pitch when Ada, feeling a rush of confidence she hadn't felt in years, posted pictures of her artwork on social media. Her paintings, breathtaking in detail and almost magical in their realism, quickly gained attention. Within a week, an inbox message popped up from a man named Mr. Lawson, a well-known art collector in Lagos. He was impressed by her raw talent and insisted on meeting her. Nervous but excited, Ada invited him to her apartment. Mr. Lawson, dressed in sharp designer clothes, stood in her cramped living room, eyes wide as he studied the paintings lining the walls. "You have something special, Ada," he said, his tone serious. "Your work, it's alive. I want to offer you a solo exhibition at my gallery." Ada's heart leaped. This was everything she had dreamed of, the breakthrough she had prayed for night after night. She could already see her life changing: recognition, money, stability. For the first time in forever, hope wasn't just a distant light. It was right there, within her reach. But even as Ada's star began to rise, something troubling was happening at home. Chuka, who had been full of energy and joy, started to look tired and pale. He complained of headaches and weakness, even though he was eating well. Ada brushed it off at first, thinking it was a minor illness, but as the days passed, his condition worsened. One evening, after forcing down a plate of egusi soup, Chuka lay down and whispered, "Mummy, why do I feel so tired all the time?" Ada's heart clenched with fear. That night, unable to sleep, she sat alone in the kitchen, staring at the latest portrait she had painted, a platter of suya and chilled malt. Suddenly, her eyes caught something she hadn't noticed before. In the background of the painting, barely visible, was a faint image of herself. Thinner, paler, her eyes sunken. Her hands began to tremble. A terrible realization hit her like cold water. The food wasn't free. Somehow, with every meal she created, a part of her own life force was being drained, feeding not just her son's hunger, but stealing their vitality. Panic surged through her. She remembered the days when she was too weak to stand after painting multiple meals, the strange exhaustion she had blamed on overwork. It had all seemed harmless until now. Chuka's suffering wasn't a coincidence. It was connected. Ada fell to her knees, sobbing, guilt crashing over her in waves. Her gift, what she thought was a blessing, had become a silent curse. But the exhibition was fast approaching, and the world was watching. Mr. Lawson's calls came daily, asking about new pieces. The neighborhood kids peeked through her window, curious to see the woman who had suddenly become famous. And yet, Chuka was fading before her eyes. Ada was trapped. If she stopped painting, the food would disappear, and the fragile comfort they had built would collapse. But if she kept going, she risked losing Chuka and herself. She sat in the dark, holding her paintbrush like it was a weapon, her mind racing. There was no easy answer, no way out of the nightmare she had unknowingly created. All she could do was pray that somehow she would find the strength to choose the right path before it was too late. The night of the exhibition arrived, and Ada stood in front of the mirror, barely recognizing the woman staring back. Her cheeks were hollow, her eyes rimmed with dark circles, her hands shaking as she tried to zip up a borrowed dress. The once vibrant woman, who had poured love and color into her canvases, now looked fragile, worn thin by the very miracle she had once welcomed. But her eyes burned with a quiet determination. This night was more than an art show. It was the crossroads of everything she had fought for, and everything she was willing to sacrifice. The gallery was alive with Lagos's elite, critics, collectors, influencers, buzzing with excitement over the artist whose work seemed to leap off the canvas. Flashbulbs popped, guests murmured in admiration, and Mr. Lawson beamed as he introduced Ada to one person after another. They praised her precision, her realism, the way her paintings seemed almost enchanted. But Ada, though grateful, moved through the crowd like a ghost, her mind miles away, her thoughts tethered to Chuka, who was home resting, his small body weakened by forces neither of them fully understood. Late that night, after the exhibition closed and Ada returned home, she found Chuka awake, his eyes glistening with tears. "Mummy," he whispered, his voice barely audible, "I don't want you to be sick because of me." Ada's heart shattered. She knelt beside him, holding his frail hands. "You are everything to me, Chuka," she whispered. "But we can't live like this anymore. This isn't real life." Chuka looked up at her, his eyes full of trust and love. "Then stop, Mummy. Please." Tears streaming down her cheeks, Ada stood up and pulled out her last blank canvas. This time, she painted not food, not fleeting meals to fill empty stomachs, but a vision, a future where she and Chuka were free. She painted them standing tall, healthy and strong, surrounded by warmth, love, and real abundance. She painted a home filled with light, shelves lined with books and real groceries, laughter spilling from every corner. Stroke after stroke, her hands trembled, her body weaker than ever, but her spirit poured out onto the canvas with fierce clarity. When she was done, she gazed at it one last time, whispered a prayer, and collapsed. Ada woke up to the bright, sterile lights of a hospital room. Confused and disoriented, she turned her head and saw Chuka sitting beside her, his hand clasped tightly in hers. He looked stronger, his cheeks fuller, his eyes no longer clouded with pain. Mr. Lawson stood at the foot of the bed, concern etched on his face but relief in his eyes. "We almost lost you," Mr. Lawson said softly, "but you're safe now, both of you." Through broken sobs, Ada explained everything: the food, the paintings, the strange, dark magic that had both saved and nearly destroyed them. Mr. Lawson listened intently, his eyes full of understanding. "You don't have to carry this burden alone anymore," he said. "I've arranged housing support and a scholarship for Chuka. You have talent, Ada. Real talent. Not magic, but heart and skill. And we're going to nurture that the right way." The strange power of the portraits never returned. The canvases that had once produced miracles now held only beautiful, ordinary paint. But Ada didn't mourn their passing. She and Chuka rose from their ordeal stronger than before, bound by something deeper than hunger or hardship. They had survived, together. Months later, Ada sat in the park under the shade of a tall tree, her sketch pad resting on her lap. Chuka played nearby, his laughter ringing out clear and bright. Ada's pencil moved across the page, not to conjure food, not to summon miracles, but simply to capture a moment of quiet, simple joy. The real magic, she now knew, wasn't in the paintings. It was in their survival, their hope, and the love that had carried them through it all.
Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe for more teachable and inspiring folk tales by FE.